J&jlive. I'm your host, as always, Jefferson Schill, my partner in crime.
What's up, guys? I'm Jared Jenkins. I handle outbound for Lifesize.
Today we wanted to bring over a special guru, if I may call you that, Gabe Larsen from InsideSales.com. Gabe, can you introduce yourself, please, to our audience?
Absolutely. So I'm Gabe Larsen. I run a lot of marketing stuff over here at Inside Sales. One of the things I'm proud about, we call it Labs. It's our research and best practice group, but bounced around a little bit before Inside Sales, did some consulting and some financial work, but I love the tech space and glad to be on the show.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. We wanted you on because you've built just that, a successful content platform, and now with Webcast being more trendy, content is always king. We wanted to hear from the guru, if we can just refer to you as that for now. So let's get right into it. Gabe, live versus filmed and edited. What would you recommend for Webcast, a live or filmed and edited?
You know, I mean, certainly it depends on your audience, right? I have found, I mean, this is a tough one, you guys. I feel like for most people, you should probably start with live. It's just a way to kind of optimize it and get it going, making sure you're interacting and you're kind of filling your audience. So I'd probably say start live and then do that, and then potentially move to more of a filmed option. Now, I do feel like if you're playing in a space that's more consumer heavy, you can't. I mean, I'm more open to go that direction and kind of play the game of just the film. But if you're in the B2B world and you're going with Webcast, I think you got to start live and do that until you feel like you've mastered it.
Right. Well, luckily, we are J&J Live.
J&J Live.
Another quick question to follow that, Gabe, is, how would you go about promoting one versus the other? How would you promote live versus a recorded webcast?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I feel like most people forget, man. I mean, when it comes to content, right, there's certainly you got to get it down on paper, but then you got to figure out how to distribute it. And I think the distribution is at least half the battle, right? And so, again, I mean, I think people need to probably focus on just the core elements of distribution rather than saying, hey, man, if I'm doing this live versus I'm doing this film, I got to do this completely different. Again, depending on where you are in that journey, I think you just got to master distribution in general. And so one piece I would probably put on that is just to give an example or kind of a takeaway on that idea is this idea of swim with the sharks. People are like, I don't even know what you mean by that, but it's a principle I've found in content that works very well, specifically in distribution. And that's kind of like, well, let's not use me and you as an example because that's probably, I'm not a shark, but the idea is you got to find some vehicle that's working very well. Or if you've got somebody, if I was a big thought leader and you guys are just starting your show, you get me on and you have me push it to my audience. It obviously just quadruples or doubles your distribution opportunity rather than just going through your network. And so swim with the sharks. And there's a lot of other principles like this. Distribution you got to nail, start there, then you can start to think about, okay, if I'm doing a film version versus a live, maybe how would I want to do that slightly different, but I think you got to hit the basics first.
Makes sense. Great advice.
That makes sense. Yeah, really, really good advice. One thing that we've been looking at is kind of the consistency of it and developing that cadence. We've been going about once a week. Pretty much we'll find the guests and we'll let them know in advance, hey, we're going to work with you next week. We come up with the questions. What cadence have you found to be effective? Is it a weekly thing, a monthly thing? You let people know a month in advance?
Too, huh? Daily even, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is tough, right? I love, if you haven't checked out Neil Patel, I love some of the stuff he's doing. And the guy's a freaking machine. He wrote this article. It was so funny. He was like, I was trying to kind of test out my engagement, my activity on Twitter posts. And so he kind of said, hey, I'm doing I was doing one a week, and then I did a couple, a week, and then I did a couple a day. And he's like, lo and behold, if I did like 20 posts a day, I got a lot more action than I did if I did it once a week. So he was like, man, you got to go all in and just do it as much as you can. I only use that as an example, right? I think, and that's obviously a little out of like webcasting and podcasts, et cetera, but I think you got to at least commit yourself to doing it once a week. And man, I can't press enough on consistency. It's like, I'm 175, 180, about a year and a half into kind of my podcast called Playmakers. And a lot of doubters out there, they're like, the average podcast only goes 4 episodes. And I just said to myself, look, number one, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for at least the next couple of years. And I just said, I'm going to go at least once a week. So you've got to get consistency, number one, to your guys' point. Now, on how often, just seeing what we do, once a week just didn't cut it. You basically just saw kind of this, and then it kind of went down, and then it went 2 up. You don't want that in viewers. You want to be more top of mind. So we do it now twice a week, and sometimes I'll add in a rant cast that kind of throws me to 3 times. And it just helps do a little more of this, so you kind of got your audience always thinking about it. So I try to go at least twice a week on kind of major media, meaning, video or podcasting. And then I'm a big believer in repurposing, right? So I take those videos and podcasts, and we may get into that, but I love it. One company called Sales Benchmark Index, I think they're the maestros at this, man. They do the video, and then they repurpose it into so many other methods. It's just it's just a science. I love what they do.
Right.
That's great. Thank you for that. One thing that we've been looking at a lot is and you spoke on swimming with the sharks and kind of developing that base before you even decide, are we going to go live and we're going to go, edited. The thing we've been looking into a lot is branding. And you were talking about consistency, and branding is one of those things you want to be consistent with as you move along. We're only a couple into this, but it's something that we've been able to look at and be like, okay, this is really important. Could you talk a little bit on the importance of branding? Some things like, how do you decide on a good name, create that channel, promote the channel, and things along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I'm truthfully more, I'll get into branding, but I am so often more of a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. And mostly just because there's been a few times in my life around, I remember I started this business, and it's been 15 years ago, and we were so concerned with our business cards that we'd never sold anything. We were so concerned with the business cards that I remember we spent weeks and weeks on that. And there's some sort of balance. Like, I prefer to sell something first and then figure out, more back into it. So I like the ready, fire, aim concept. And I do feel like people spend too much time on the branding, too much time on the idea. We're on actually our 3rd name on the Playmaker podcast, and a lot of people are like, you messed up on that, man. That was a mistake. You lost the opportunity to brand it. And I said, I probably did, but truthfully, I wanted to start to see what worked with my audience first. And so we started with sales, but then we went to sales acceleration. We ended up with Playmakers, and I'll walk you through that just real quick because I think it feeds into the branding. Another principle I love to work with is divert a river, don't dig a well. And I'm stealing this from a mentor of mine. And so when I think of names, you want to think of something that you can basically steal traffic from. So think of a river as like a river of traffic. And if people are searching a lot for sales, then it's probably not a bad idea within my world, right? I'm kind of a sales consultant, to probably use something like that in my name, because I want to steal some of that traffic, right? A lot of people, they want to come up with really funky names, and come to find out, it's like, well, no one ever searches that, so you're digging a well. You're literally not going to be able to steal any SEO juice from anybody else on that. So that's probably the thing I think is a good principle to think about with branding. And we started with kind of like a sales acceleration podcast. But one of the things I found was, for my audience, as I tried to get feedback, and this is the key on branding, it's got to be about iteration. So start with something, pull your audience, and start to get some feedback. And just talking about sales acceleration was interesting for my audience, which is kind of sales and marketing leaders. But people wanted to be inspired. I got a lot of feedback like, it's not just about tips and tactics. It's about using words like transformation, inspiration. And so we ended up going with something more around Playmakers, as I said. And And we ran a lot of Facebook tests on this. One of the things I love with branding is, run some ad copy on Facebook. You can get some immediate response on that from a visual imagery as well as some ideas. And just from clicks and engagement, Playmakers kind of jumped out for us. But it also opened up our audience a little bit. So I had some guy who he wrote a book called Mind Boxing and talked about the art of the possibility. And again, we consider Playmakers anybody who's doing cool stuff focused on sales and marketing, but it opened it up to more inspirational and transformational stories as well. And so those are a couple principles probably also tied into a little bit of our journey. And I think that's kind of the way we think about branding, but also don't get too caught up in that stuff. Make sure you get going, because sometimes iteration is king, not your first shot, right?
Well, thanks for that, Gabe. I know you were talking about, rather than, digging that well, working on that branding, things that are going to catch and, pick up when people are searching for things. How do you go about choosing a topic and a headline that's really going to catch an audience and catch that feedback?
Oh, you mean per show is kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah,
is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the team debates this every time. There's actually a couple tools. At first, we actually had the guests. We kind of said, hey, guests, why don't you give us a title? But the thing is, you kind of need stuff that's a little more, I don't want to use the word clickbait, but, something that is a little more sexy, right? And so I don't know if there's a short-proof way to do this. There are a couple tools out there. You'd have to search them online. They're kind of headline aggregators where you could literally go in and kind of test your headlines. And we do that pretty religiously. In addition, we try to use some content aggregator websites just to figure out what content is actually working. So I'm thinking like it's called what's the sumo? BuzzSumo, yeah. So BuzzSumo is a good one, just to kind of see, hey, in our space, what are people talking about? That helps us get some ideas around what episodes we maybe from a content we should be going, and then we'll use some of these headline tester websites. And then, truthfully, man, I wish we would test every episode, but we're pumping them out too fast. So it's really a BuzzSumo, some headline testers, and then it's just a couple of us in the room just shooting the bull saying, what's the sexiest thing we can kind of come up with around sales process optimization? So we'll throw in a couple of cuss words here and there, but I don't know if I've got kind of the carte blanche on that, but that would be the process we follow.
Right. To add on to that, Gabe, do you have a specific day in the week that tends to be more attracting or attracts more attention, like Friday, Monday, Wednesday, for your webcasts or podcasts?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we found Wednesday to be the best for us right around lunchtime for webcasts. So that's typically when we do that. And then we release our podcast twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday, just right in the morning, bright and early, so we can catch a lot of people on that early morning commute. We did do we do Monday and Thursday on the podcast, and Wednesday on the webcast. We did try both Tuesday and Friday. I mean, Friday was just a bust. It just didn't work for us. A webcast, we did have a decent amount of success on Thursdays on the webcast. But man, Monday was really hot for us, again, right in the morning for those podcasts when people are coming into work. So we've kind of settled on that. Monday, Thursday podcast, Wednesday's kind of our webcast.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Kind of going from there, you talked a little bit about swimming with the sharks, and getting some of your peers and some of these big names to help push it along and post it for you. Where are you seeing are the effective ways and effective medias to post your webcasts and your podcasts on? Landing pages to push your webcasts out on.
Yeah, I mean, email still trumps everything, whether people like it or not. I mean, from an audience perspective, I do believe if you can get into Facebook and you can build an audience, we've got the Playmakers group that we run, and we've built, we got 1,000 people in that. But I think email is still going to trump. The question is, how do you build up your list, right? And can you get a shark to actually send it to their list? I mean, the ideal scenario says, hey, you do a webcast with me, and I actually blast that webcast out to my list, and you guys basically get the benefit of it. Not very many people are open to do that. And, even a couple of years ago, that was a simpler ask. But now it's so competitive that usually you just got to start small, and you say things like, hey, you pull a shark on and you really make sure you hit their social channels. I think a lot of people miss it, say, hey, you pull a guest like me on, but what you don't do is, a couple days before the episode, you get me an email and you get me some sample LinkedIn posts, you get me some sample Facebook, or you give me some sample Twitter posts, and you ask me to send that out, right? I mean, that's, I think, the minimal you want to be hitting. And if you're more B2B, you want to push LinkedIn. If you're more B2C, you probably go more Facebook. But so you got to start there. But, man, if you can get someone to open up the kimono and get that email list, because, again, I mean, you look at someone like InsideSales.com, we do a once-a-month newsletter. We have our blog. We get 10,000 people, a week looking at our blog. We've got hundreds of thousands of people in our email list, our opt-in email list. You tap into that, that's money. So the more you can kind of say, hey, put this on your blog, or let's turn this into a blog on your website. But I think you got to sometimes go baby steps, because you don't want to offend those speakers. Socials is a must, and then start to dip your toe in. Hey, what if we got this on your blog, or what if we got into your email, or what if we got into your company's email? What if we got onto your newsletter? Those types of things can just take it to the next level.
Yeah, how do you ask a guest just that, like to post a webcast on their social network or on their company's network? And to go along with that is, what's the appropriate way to ask a guest to come on when you don't have a direct connection with them or direct relationship? We know you because we use InsideSales.com.
Sure.
But if we didn't know you, how would we approach you? What's the appropriate way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all in it we're all selfish. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's a give to get mentality. And so if you have nothing to give, then you're probably not going to get anything. So, I mean, when I reach out to people, I mean, I'm basically pitching, look, I got 15,000 sales and marketing experts, leaders, who are going to basically listen to you. I'm going to build your brand. It's about you. It's not about me. It's about you. We're hitting 200 episodes. We've been recognized in a couple magazines as a top podcast. And so I've got to help them understand that this is about building their brand and about building their company. If I can pop that switch, then guess what? I basically get their content, and it becomes an easier ask to say, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this episode, and I'm in the giving mode here. I'm going to get you in front of sales marketing experts, and I'm going to put you on our blog, 10,000 visits, and you're going to be in our newsletter. Hundreds of thousands of people get that. Now, I've given. Now comes the moment to ask. I want you to consider the following, and typically I give them 3 options: social, blog, email list. Here's some material. Which one do you feel like most comfortable in doing? But it's not until I've given do I expect to get. And I think that's the recipe for success.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Another question I have for you, Gabe, is, once you post your webcast, what do you do next? I mean, I know we talked about distribution, but do you have any just quick tips on what you do immediately after you post that webcast?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, first and foremost, you want to get ahead of it a little bit, and see if you can make sure that the person that you did it with, you want to give them a little bit of a heads up, and I think that's in an email format. And sometimes the key is truthfully getting them to get you in touch with their marketing team, right? Or make sure that their marketing team knows, because oftentimes it's like, hey, I'm willing to share it on my social, but InsideSales.com, well, we've got 50,000 people on Twitter. And if you don't remind me to do that, then I may not do that. So I love the heads up email a couple days before, or even right at day of, morning of. I think that's a must. But I think content goes stale fairly quickly. And so we call it a clap, and it's basically who is the network of people that we have that as soon as something goes live, we can almost like send out a little bit of an alert, and get them to kind of just go ape on it, right? So level one that we try to do, and we don't do it every time. I mean, we're producing enough content, you can't quote unquote clap everything. But from an internal standpoint, like we just had a Forbes article hit about our event that's coming up next month, and we made a top 10 executive event list. Like that's a piece of content that I'm going to podcast about, but we want that out there. So we send a broadcast email to all 400 employees at Inside Sales with a sample email snippet or a sample social post, and also a little note that they could send to their customers. And it's like, guys, clap it, get it out there, and we want this thing to go viral. So I usually, I mean, again, I'd love to say that there's secrets and there's miracles you can pull, but you got to kind of go crawl, walk, run, right? And it's like, what assets do you have right now that you can do? And most people have 25 employees, 10, 100, 500. Knock that employee base out, man, and find a way to have them do it. That's, I think, something you want to probably start with.
Great advice, and kind of goes on with my next question is who's in charge of, like when you post a webcast or a podcast or put some content out, who's in charge of customer engagement? Because you're going to get comments, you're going to get people to like you. Who in your show is doing that engagement and responding to the comments?
Yeah, man, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And I like to go with the scrappy mentality. Like, nobody owns my LinkedIn, nobody owns my Twitter, nobody's commenting for me. So to start, right? I mean, so when we got going, you got to own it, and you do it from there. Now, as soon as you can, and if you're actually getting some traction, and we're basically to this place, certainly you can get, you build a little bit of a small team. Or I love the outsource. We've trained a couple people on, we grab people on Fiverr, some external people. I literally give them access to my Twitter, to my LinkedIn, because it still needs to come from the host, right? I mean, you don't want, if you're the guy, then you're the person who needs to be engaging. But at some point, I think you want to loose those bands and have somebody acting in behalf of you. But for most people who are starting this kind of journey, you got to do it yourself a few times in order to be able to teach somebody else, like, hey, for comments, these are the types of things you want to comment back on, or doing social posts. This is the kind of, one of the things I found initially was my marketing team, when they posted some of my stuff, it was so soft, and I wanted some spice in those comments. I wanted it to be like, hey, you idiots, this is the best damn thing you've ever seen, so check it out, right? Like, my marketing team's not going to write that. So, but that's Gabe, that's me, and so I needed them to get my voice, and the only way for them to get it is to do it for the first little while yourself, and you got to figure it out. I mean, is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Is it going to be Facebook? Is it going to be asking your buddies? So you find the channels that work for you, and once you've found that, yeah, I love getting the intern to manage my profile. We've got this person in the Philippines that help. Yeah, fantastic, but you got to do it first. Right.
One thing I think we may have, a little struggle with is just kind of how authentic can we be? How much can we bring our personalities out into these webcasts? Balancing that line of being professional, but being ourselves to drive a little more excitement. What would you suggest as far as your authenticity that you're projecting on these webcasts?
Yeah, I don't know. You guys know Gary Vaynerchuk? You know Gary Vaynerchuk? Does that name ring a bell? Have you heard of this guy? You got to check this guy out, right? So he runs kind of a webcast, podcast, Facebook. He's gotten fairly popular, but unfortunately, I think the world in which we live, it's shock and awe, man, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So if you're just going to jump on a podcast and just kind of be mellow yellow and just kind of be professional, no one cares, no one, you got to go to shock and awe, I think. I mean, I'm not saying this Gary Vaynerchuk, he uses the F word on, about every other sentence, and his mantra, his mojo's a little different than Lifesize and Inside Sales, but it's something you need to see, because he goes to kind of the extreme, like, he's yelling and ranting and screaming and kind of like, you got to watch it, because it plays into that, like, whoa, look at this guy, right? So there's always a balance. I get it, but I think if you're not pulling some, saying some jokes, you're not laughing out loud, if you're not yelling at sometimes and making sure that your personality comes out, or you know, a lot of times if it is like a podcast, people aren't seeing you, right? So you gotta make them feel it. And I think people err too on the side of professionalism. I think you got to have somebody. If somebody hasn't told you you're being inappropriate or you're being unprofessional, then you're not there yet. You got to have somebody complain probably once or twice. Then you know that you're probably in a place that you need to kind of pull it back. But until then, I'd go to that line. I'd probably go to that line.
I think on that end, I'm just going to tell the audience this is vodka then, and we're having ourselves some whiskey tonight. Let's go.
That's right, man.
That's great advice, Gabe. Great advice.
I mean, you know, obviously, you know, when it's company sponsored, you got to be careful. But I just feel like if you want any listeners, you guys, I mean, you gotta be different. I mean, look at entertainment. It's you know, they got people wearing no clothes. You got I don't know, do something different. What's your different thing? And I'm not saying I've got that, but I do think about it fairly often. Like, am I more loose than other podcasters? Because no one wants to hear monotone, right? Nobody does.
Yeah, we've kind of put it in our own hands so that we, you know, as time goes on, can get away with doing some of those types of things. You know, we still say it's not necessarily sponsored. We didn't really get into sponsorships and sponsored content, but at least, you know, brought to you by or, you know, pushed by Lifesize or whatever it might be. But it's still us, and that's, you know, that's why that question comes up, because, you know, we're both pretty laid back guys. We're pretty chill, but you know, we can be fun. We like to have fun too. It's like, how do we bring that out in a podcast, you know, or a webcast?
I got a question too for you, Gabe. Talking about sponsored and sponsored versus non-sponsored content, do you sponsor your podcasts? If so, how often? Are you putting advertising in between that? Is that something you would suggest? I know it's going to take a while to build an audience before you even probably look at sponsored content, but is that something you would you currently do or would suggest?
Yeah, you know, we've tested it out just a little bit, I mean, certainly I think anytime you can kind of monetize something, you want to do it. When is the right time? You know, as I said, we're just starting to test that out a little bit. We've done a couple things. We've mostly used it to kind of push our own thoughts and our own thought processes. And I do think there's an appreciation when people feel like it's authentic and that, you know, you don't go over the top. And so I don't know if I can give you a really good answer. I mean, I do think you got to monetize anything you can do, but I think that's kind of like that concept of branding and business cards. It's like we've been focused so much just on the last year of getting a cadence and building the listenership up. And I think that's the right focus. I think we've had now 4 or 5 people reach out to us and say, hey, you know, could we sponsor on your show? And to me, that was kind of the right time. Like when people are starting to recognize that you know, when people ask me, you know, then I'm ready to do it. But we didn't kind of start there. So that's probably my quick and dirty on that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Gabe. Anything for you, from you, Jared?
I don't have anything else. Once again, we're with Gabe Larsen. Thank you very much. InsideSales.com. He's our Webcast podcast guru.
That's right.
Appreciate it, you guys. I'd love to jump on anytime.
All right, thank you again, everybody. Next week, we're going to be joined by Seed Logic's industry expert, John Aguilar, and we're going to be talking about SEO. So, once more, we live, baby. Keep it authentic.
j&jlive.